Okay, Dan, really appreciate you joining me today. And basically, for those who don't know, Dan was the person who actually employed me into technology at Skipton Building Society. So I feel really privileged to actually be able to conduct this video podcast, with yourself and find out about your journey through tech, from developer right through to what you are now as head of systems development at Skipton Building Society. So Dan, really appreciate you taking time out to talk to me.
Good to be here.
Yeah, good. That's always a good start. I guess from my perspective and people listening, they might not know that you started out as a financial consultant, but then became a Jade developer. So at what point did you realise that you wanted to be a developer?
Yeah, it was an interesting one. So I left, did my A levels, and wasn't quite sure kind of what I wanted to do at uni. So I did that classic thing where you take a year out. That was 20 plus years ago. And I just initially just took a job. So it just happened to be in financial consulting department. And I liked the work, liked to learn. So naturally just started working down the route of being an accountant, and thank God I managed to dodge that bullet. But the interesting thing is that the company I was working for wrote the financial packages, so the systems that we use. It was an in-house product, and at the time they were making some changes to it. So we needed to test it. So I got involved as a UAT tester and I was testing the application. And when I figured out kind of what was going on and kind of that you could change this and somebody was programming, I wanted to know more. So I was really lucky to get a demo from one of the programmers, and that was it. I was absolutely hooked into it. And at the time, I immediately I remember applied to that company and the Skipton company, trying to get into a development team. Neither of them accepted me. But luckily enough, I think there was three trainee vacancies at Skipton, and they got filled, and a fourth one became available. And the lady who was recruiting at the time, I must have impressed her at least a little bit to get the fourth slot. So,
Oh wow, brilliant! And I guess from a development perspective, did you find it hard when you started?
so I came in from an absolute non-tech background, funnily enough. So I wasn't until I had that hook point. I hadn't really expressed too much of an interest in technology. In fact, I'm probably showing my age now, but at the school I went to, you couldn't do technology unless you did business studies at the same time because there weren't enough computers.
Wow.
I know I don't look that old. But once I was kind of hooked into it and was interested, it's very logical, it's analytical. You do need a certain type of brain, and you've got to be slightly wired that way. But once you've got past the base principles, it's a bit like kind of akin it to when you're learning mathematics. You learn a few basics, and the basics apply to everything at that point. So it almost doesn't matter what technology you're using. The patterns and principles are pretty much the same. And once you've got your head around all the confusing words they use and actually understanding English what they mean, it was it was pretty easy going once you got past that first couple of hurdles.
Yeah. So I guess what was the hardest part about being a developer? Is there anything that you could think of? Because I'm just trying to maybe gauge from somebody who's got years of experience, because I know that we've seen that appetite from people wanting to get into technology. I mean, I think we have 140 applicants for seven trainee roles, so there's definitely that appetite there. And I guess, is there anything that you could pinpoint that this was the hardest part about being a developer?
So the interesting thing for me, I think, the demand is huge. You're right. There's a lot of interest in this space now, but genuine interest and genuine curiosity and genuinely wanting to learn really puts you in good stead in tech, because tech is always moving. It never stands still. In fact, the rates are so phenomenal these days that, in my view, you kind of have to have that appetite of kind of lifelong learning and really want to keep following and where tech is going. And it's a very creative world, this technology. People don't always think of it as a kind of creative space, but it's almost like painting pictures and designing. There is an art form to it. as cheesy as that sounds. So if you're interested in solving creative problems and solving it differently each time, because it's not always the same thing, then I think that really helps. If you're looking for a role where it's kind of, I'll say, steady, then technology is not for you as an individual. You've really got to commit to wanting to keep learning.
And I suppose following on from that learning element, how have you kept up to date with technology throughout your career?
Some of my fellows might say I don't. No, I think you've got to absolutely carve out time and make it part of the day job to learn. We're very proud at Skipton. We talk quite a lot in the technology teams about lifelong learning. We talk about making sure we're doing our L&D days, doing hackathons, picking up the new technologies, having a play, and being, like I said, curious. It's got to be baked into everything you do, because you can't just say, I'll get to it, or I've got this meeting, I've got to go do this particular important project. If you're not engaging with learning and wanting to do it as part of technology, you just naturally will fall behind.
Yeah.
But I think if you find it exciting, which often you tend to find most technologies do, it becomes part of your rhythm and the continual learning. But if you try and treat it as a side of desk job, or I'll get to it on a weekend, or I won't make the time, then you are, in technology terms, you're essentially going backwards, because it moves at such a rate of knots.
Yeah, I suppose the L and D days just come in really handy to actually keep up to date. But I suppose for some of the more complex qualifications, how do you? Because you've obviously done a master's, how have you carved out that time for that continuous learning?
Probably a couple of things in it for me. So when you are picking up a kind of more bigger piece of learning, you've got to think about kind of your work-life balance.
Yeah.
You will make certain choices, and at times it will be certain sacrifices. The one thing is you can only be 100%. There's no way you can actually generate any more. So it's where you choose to make certain decisions or choices. So that might be that you are consciously saying, I might sacrifice a bit of personal stuff, a bit of family time, but it's doing that very consciously, because I do feel you need to get that work-life balance right, and be there for your family moments and be around people. But if you're committing to a qualification like a master's, you do need to talk to your family and help them understand that every now and again you might miss something, or you need some time away. What I would say, and I will say this about Skipton, is they're very, very good about giving you the time and the space and working with you. So whether it is a business qualification or a technical qualification, actually giving you a bit of time to think about what you're learning and how you might apply it back to the business.
Yeah.
And they get benefit in the long run, so why would they not want to do that?
Absolutely.
But the willingness to do that from an organisation, Skipton is very leading in that thinking.
Yeah. Well, picking up on the leading element, when did you actually know, from going from a developer, that actually you were going to take this path, which to most, if you see it, it's quite linear, because you went from a developer to then manager of systems development, was it? SQL development that I was joining.
So being a developer, one of the cool things about being a developer is you get to be really creative, build loads of cool solutions, solve lots of problems. Yes, you're in the tech on a day-to-day basis. I think what I start to see or feel as I kind of felt my way into kind of people leadership and leading people, is you start to see that actually you can still be part of that creative process, but actually you do that through empowered and trusted teams. So the kind of cool stuff that the teams were creating, you were kind of helping lay some of the foundational elements of that, and then kind of seeing them go on and build the fantastic solutions and kind of clever tech. Every now and again, you absolutely miss it, you just do. But I slightly justify it in my own mind in terms of how I feel when I see a team of people go off and solve a really complex problem together, and know that I helped build some of that team. So in my view, by proxy, yeah, you do help build the solutions. At least that's how I kind of swear that problem away, because ultimately you still love tech as a tech person.
Yeah.
I still dabble and still play, still like to try my hand, but I kind of like seeing people blossom through similar solutions.
Yeah. So what do you dabble with currently?
So we're going through quite a big program of change at Skipton at the minute. So clearly a huge cloud piece, huge kind of internal kind of systems migration piece, breaking down monoliths. So I absolutely use my Azure credits to death. That kind of those dollars never go far enough. Um, that might be just me having a play with some cloud stuff. Sometimes it's about informing some decisions at work or potentially helping me understand the questions I have to ask. Sometimes it can be just mucking around with some bots or maybe doing some FIFA trading and stuff like that. So
Right. Okay. Okay. Have you got FIFA 23?
I do.
You do. Okay. Are you trading on FIFA 23?
I'm about at 1.4 million at the moment.
Oh
So
wow.
I've got a bit of coin.
Oh, and that's all from trading. All from trading. Wow. So there we go. Blooding FIFA 23 players. Yeah, don't need to buy packs.
Yeah.
Get into trading.
It's because I can't play the game properly, so I have to do something with it.
Yeah, I see lots of people who just get into it for the trading and seeing what team they can build up.
Yeah, I was chatting to some of my leaders a while ago. We were almost doing a bit of life story about how geeky can you go with some of this stuff, and whether it's paper trading or cryptocurrency or other things, it's kind of more understanding some of the underlying tech, and it almost sort of becomes less about the actual game or content than you still playing with tech really when you start to think about it.
Yeah, I think trading in itself is an art form. So hat, hat off to you. I guess from a cloud perspective, and you've been dabbling around. What's your favourite piece of cloud tech? Is there anything that you've dabbled around with and gone, you know what, this is really cool?
Back in when kind of cloud was first coming in, so when kind of Microsoft in particular, because that's primarily what we use, was starting to shape their portals and their web and mobile applications, etc. I found it incredibly awesome that you could stand, in a car park in Tesco's and spin up an entire website with a few clicks of buttons and actually see, yes, it doesn't have any content on it, but seeing the servicing side of kind of not having to do a lot of this hand cranking and creating things that are more administrative stuff that you just need to have done and magically appear for you, and then you can get onto the exciting, interesting pieces. It still blows my mind that perhaps what used to take 20, 30, 50 days to do is now done at the absolute push of a button. And then you can focus more on the business problems and solving the interesting parts and the more kind of hygiene side of technology.
Yeah, and I suppose that supply and demand and being able to scale things up and down as needed. Um, I remember, and this is putting you on the spot actually. I remember being interviewed, and you asked me a question, and it was software versus hardware,
Okay.
and I thought, well, what a question, and then it got me thinking about cloud, and actually without the internet, there is no cloud. So when you think of software versus hardware, and you think about the roles, I guess would you actually ever ask that question again with cloud in mind?
It's an interesting. So I think it's a different question in my mind now than perhaps it was back then. So I would probably say the question is now specialism versus generalism. And what I mean by that is cloud technologies and broader technologies, software as a service, etc., started to lift theoretical understanding and niche understanding away from low level technical detail into more kind of fourth, fifth generation thinking. So you don't necessarily have now to think in depth on everything about networks, architecture, scaling, non-functional security, etc. Um, you still need a good generalist understanding of all those broad things if you're trying to build a capability. But every now and again, that's going to go wrong, and you'll need a deep specialist person to really help you out. So that
Yeah.
could be networks, it could be hardware, it could be WANs or whatever it might be. And I certainly wouldn't solve those working at that generalist level with working with cloud technologies.
Yeah.
You need to call out to those specialists. And there's a role for both those types of things in technology. So I think that the kind of fulcrum has moved a little bit in that most people now, certainly as you're coming through kind of schools and learning technology, is you perhaps think more about how you use those services and capabilities and become integrators of stuff. But the interesting thing is every now and again, the stuff's just going to go wrong, and then who's going to call? So you do need to think about, not losing sight of the depth of specialisms that sometimes require.
Yeah. And I suppose is there anything on the horizon with cloud that excites you?
There's an interesting thing in my mind around, I think I refer to it as everything as a service. So all of us have seen the diagrams that talk about kind of moving away from kind of infrastructure as service through platforms as service, more towards software as a service. And ideally, you kind of want to move that responsibility dial further to the right. But the interesting thing, stepping back from kind of solving problems, is I can see that the world's going to start solving problems and then potentially wanting to push it to the marketplace. So whether that's Amazon Marketplace or Azure Marketplace or whatever the thing might be.
Yeah.
So you're almost commoditizing solution solving. And then there's a thought in my mind around, well, maybe I could just buy those things or use those things in the marketplace and stitch together some of those capabilities without necessarily having to get into the weeds of the detail of creating the value. And there's many different fields that could be applied to, but let's just take your world as an example. So in data engineering, I'm sure our departments won't mind me saying, but if you take marketing as an example, marketing clearly they'll sit there and think, what is the propensity for Andy to buy something? And our credit risk department might think about what is the propensity for you to default on your mortgage. Those are models and analytical models. And you can imagine a situation that somebody could start crafting that and using some of this stuff in Azure and Synapse and all the AI technology that you know better than me. And maybe they start publishing some of these models back as models as a service. And you can imagine people might then choose to subscribe to those. And if it's a less successful model, it'll disappear out of the marketplace. If it's a more successful model, I can imagine people wanting more of it and potentially paying more for it. Now, that's just an example in just the data space.
Yeah.
So if you think and extrapolate that out across all of the service offerings in cloud, people are going to start finding niche value and ways of solving problems. And potentially it's now quite easy, a bit like the App Store, to package these problems back and put them out there for people to use or benefit from. Now, that's not that you suddenly then lose the technology teams and the things that you need, but imagine we start to become almost citizen integrators across some of these tools and offerings to go find whatever value it is you're pursuing in your particular field or domain. So that for me is the really interesting thing, is almost a community or a commoditizing of value and then finding new ways to stitch value together. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think that kind of sort of answered some of the machine learning AI and really packaging that up and making it accessible to everyone, because those are the buzzwords at the moment: machine learning, AI. You're hearing lots of people talk about that on LinkedIn. And I guess the flip side to it is there anything that really petrifies you about cloud?
So without the right security governance controls and the right balance of security governance and controls, there is a risk that this can go quite wrong in an organisation, and wrong in many forms. So that might be that you incur a lot more cost than you think you're incurring, or actually you think you're secure and you're not secure, or perhaps even that data is being used in the wrong way. So we talk a bit about kind of that data ethics that can come with machine learning and stuff like that. So it it feels a bit like the cheesy kind of with great power comes with great responsibility. There is an ability to do some fantastic things in the cloud space and kind of that modern engineering space, but that does mean that it could go without the right thoughts and controls. It could go horribly wrong.
Yeah, yeah, no, completely agree. And I guess we are, yeah, we're now at 20 minutes. So, I guess from my perspective, that there's going to be a lot of people watching this, probably from Skipton Building Society or at least listening to it. But what are some of the things that people might not know about you?
Well, let's do it. My wife thought it was a joke a few years ago and bought me a Rubik's Cube. She really wishes she hadn't done. So I then spent the next 2 years learning how to solve that repeatedly, and can do that under 60 seconds every time. It was just one of those where she thought she was being funny, and the tech nerd in me says, "No, I'm definitely learning the algorithms and solving these." So that was a kind of lesson for her in terms of thinking about Christmas presents.
Wow.
So,
Yeah. I wish I had a Rubik's cube right now and just put you on the spot.
yeah, I'm sure there's a YouTube video somewhere or something.
Yeah.
But,
I guess actually, rather than the other two things, 'cause I knew there was something else I wanted to talk to you about. You actually got a role with Yorkshire and Humber Institute of Technology.
Yeah.
So what is that role?
It's probably worth going. I'll try not to go through the full detail because I'm conscious of time. But I used to be a chairman of a junior football club. So for about 10 years, I was doing community stuff, developing kind of a proposition there, helping to put pitches in at the local club, getting it kind of leased for 25 years, etc. And I kind of concluded that piece in my head, and kind of that was me wanting to just have something sustainable that I'd given back and helped with the community. And I kind of felt that was kind of done. And I was starting to look kind of, well, where is my next thing that I can try and be a part of and try and help something? And there just was a natural coming together in terms of my interest in technology, and how you get young people into tech, how schools and universities are coming together. And there's a number of institutes of technology around the country. And Yorkshire and Humber was one of them. And I don't know if people do know this, but Skipton are actually a partner of Yorkshire and Humber Institute of Technology, so we've given some funding to help. And what they were looking for is somebody to come onto their board, and try and help understand what's the proposition. How can we actually help not just young people or people interested in technology, but how can we help employers leverage and benefit from some of the skills and learnings that these bright minds are gaining. So it's still very much in its infancy in my mind. And we've only had probably 2 or 3, 4 board meetings where we're just getting to understand kind of how might you get value from this as an employer as well as helping young people.
Yeah, because I guess from my perspective, I have a 15-year-old son who's actually 15 this week, and one of the reasons that I was actually setting up this YouTube channel and actually talking to professionals like yourself within the tech space is because COVID really, in one essence, it opened up cloud, it opened up working remote, hybrid working. But the other thing it did is have quite a negative impact on computer science because my son was basically doing computer science on sheet of paper, which I know myself and you'll know you can't do computer science on paper. It's near enough impossible. So I suppose Yorkshire and Humber Institute of Technology will play an integral part in actually getting children, getting people at college those vital skills back.
Yeah, there's something as well around making it real and how do you link it to industry. So I have seen examples where people don't quite make the connection between how do you use this creativity and find value from it and solve real world business problems. And what Yorkshire Humber IoT is trying to do is bring companies and the learning together so you can see some of the art of the possible. So they're quite interesting things like metaverse, for example. And interesting, I haven't done much in this space and I'm still doing some of my reading, but seeing some of the practical applications of how you might use some of this in industry has been quite interesting and eye-opening.
Yeah, no, absolutely brilliant. So, any final words from yourself?
I think if I was leaving you with anything, and I say this to you as an individual, but equally to us all, for me, it's just keep doing the learning and making it an absolute integral part of being a technologist because I think will solve more problems and you'll learn and broaden your horizons around how you solve those problems if you keep doing that learning and keep having a play, keep expanding. Because I think there's a bit of a danger if you're not careful of getting locked into a vertical or put in a particular box if you want. But I see us all as technologists and we can absolutely go broader than particular vertical of a tech.
Yeah. Well, thanks again. Really appreciate you taking time out, and it's been great to listen to everything that you've had to say. So yeah,
Thanks again.
Cheers, Dan.